Well, folks, hi. We have a mirth moment. Have you missed mirth moments? Would you like a piece of trivia to go along with them? See, this is a half hunter. If I press a little button here, it pops up. Look at that. And it works. Now, you see, the point of the matter is that if you were a gentleman in the 18th century, and you rode to hounds, which you frequently did, and you were probably several sheets to the wind when you did so, if you fell from your horse without a half hunter like this, the glass, when it broke, might alas penetrate your abdomen, with sad results. So the half hunter was invented so that gentlemen might fall from their horses, drunken as they were, without hazard to their lives. Now, I'm not an equestrian or a drunkard, but I still, from time to time, wear one. Now you see, you've achieved a great deal. You have some trivia. I feel I owe you something for deserting the Seahawks. So let me see what kind of mirth moment we have. This is called the Forgotten Anniversary. Bob was in serious trouble. He forgot his wedding anniversary. Carol and I never forget it, but we differ as to the date. Well, it's an important point. I say it was the 20th. She says it's the 27th. Was it the other way around? Anyway, so what? Bob, oops. Bob was in serious trouble. He forgot his wedding anniversary. His wife was really angry. She told him, "Tomorrow morning I expect to find a gift in the driveway that goes from 0 to 200 in 6 seconds, and it better be there." The next morning, Bob got up early and left for work. When his wife woke up, she looked out of the window, and sure enough, there was a box, gift-wrapped, sitting in the middle of the driveway. A key to the Audi coupe, surely. She put on her robe and ran out to the driveway and brought the box back into the house. Opening, she found a brand new bathroom scale. Bob was reported missing. I can tell you, the needle moves pretty quick, if you have a needle, that is. Here are some silly one-liners. Man's idea of the housework is to sweep the room with a glance. That's very unkind to man. It is easier to get forgiveness than permission. Yes. Who said that? If you look like your passport picture, you probably need the trip. Junk is something you keep for years and throw away 2 weeks before you need it. Opportunities always look bigger going than coming. Oh boy. Well, there you are. We're back in mirth moment territory. But, and keep them coming, folks. I like to accept them from members of the congregation because I then feel my embarrassment is shared. But I will never reveal the source, I promise. Might, I suppose, it's possible. Well, never mind, we won't go there. Trust. Aha. I want to talk about trust this morning because trust is so very much a part of our existence as human beings. Just a few days ago, I was down in the YOU room. You know, we have a Youth of Unity group here, a young person's group. And there's a poster on the wall, and it lists one of the virtues that we ought to practice from time to time as trust, which I thought was interesting. Now, we teach little children to be careful upon whom they bestow their trust, obviously. But when we get a little older and move into the adult world, trust does become an important factor in our lives. In fact, trust is necessary if human society is to prosper as it ought. And yet, it's a risky business, trust, sometimes, is it not? Of course, we have the classic case of Jesus putting his trust in someone called Judas, one of his own disciples. It says here in the Gospel of Luke, while he was still speaking, Jesus, a crowd appeared with the man called Judas, one of the 12 at their head. He came up to Judas to kiss him, but Jesus said, Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? The Son of Man is a common phrase that was current in the Palestine of Jesus' day. Everyone was referred to as the Son of Man or even the Son of God. It was a polite encomium, if you will. I wonder seriously, with many modern Bible scholars, whether Jesus really was betrayed by Judas. There are scholars of the Bible today who believe that Jesus arranged to have Judas betray him so that he could demonstrate his own overcoming of the experience of death. It's a dramatic hypothesis. I don't know whether it stands up or not. But it shows how our trust in others may on occasions be betrayed. I prefer another story, quite frankly, which we find in another part of the gospel. Excuse me. It's when Jesus was walking supposedly on the water. And Peter called to Jesus and said, Lord, if it is you, tell me to come over the water. Come, said Jesus. And Peter stepped down from the boat and walked towards Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the gale, he was seized with fear, and he began to sink. And he cried, Save me, Lord. And Jesus at once reached out and caught hold of him and said, Why did you hesitate? I was there when you called. It's a beautiful story. And we have to realize that that is actually an idiomatic expression in the Aramaic language of Jesus' day. People say, oh, lovely story. How could Jesus walk on the water? Nobody can walk. How could Peter walk on the water? Nobody can walk on water. It's an expression of an invitation to trust one in that culture, in that language. You say, we can walk on water together. There's a big crisis in one's life, and you reach out and say, trust me, we'll get through it together. We'll walk on the water together. You say, oh, well, that's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? Don't we have idioms that are similar? Don't we say to someone whom we love, I'll walk on coals of fire for you? I don't think we take that literally, do we? I hope not, unless we scamper very quickly. So these are idiomatic expressions. We needn't torture ourselves about wondering how miracles occur. The point of the matter is that Jesus is inviting someone whom he loves to trust him. He sees how important trust is. And he's saying, in effect, even if you begin to sink in this situation, I'll be still there to help you. So we see the huge importance of trust in our lives, in our existence. It's not too extreme to say, I think, that trust is part of the fabric of human relationships, part of what makes us human and helps us to move through life. Is our trust sometimes betrayed? Yes. Yes. Who here hasn't trusted somebody to do something and been let down? Alas, sometimes it's a loved one or a partner whom we feel has in some way let us down. There's no sharper betrayal than that, surely. Someone whom you trust and have trusted suddenly lets you down and you say, oh, how could this have happened? I knew a woman some years ago who had lived in Germany during the war. I'm sure she's passed now. But she had an appalling experience of betrayal of trust. She went to her church to confess to the priest that she had been indulging in some activities that were opposed to the regime. What she didn't know was that this priest was in the pay of what they called the Geheime Staatspolizei. We call it the Gestapo, the security police. She was arrested the same day, and she was sent to a concentration camp, not a death camp, but a concentration camp, where she almost certainly would have died had the event not happened towards the end of the war. And she said, you know, it took me years to learn to trust anybody after that experience. Because after all, if you can't trust your priest or your minister or your pastor, whom can you trust? Trust betrayed. Trust betrayed. That event occurs in our lives constantly. And there are times when we ourselves have let somebody down. I mean, we may not have done that in a huge way, in a terribly destructive way. Hopefully not. But I think everybody's had the experience of failing to meet somebody else's trust in them, to perform a function or to do something. Maybe we just couldn't do it. Maybe their expectations for our ability to deliver were too high, which is often the case. People expect sometimes too much of us. They put their faith in us, and we can't do it. We can't meet that expectation. But often it's the pain of being betrayed ourselves that hurts so very deeply. You know, in our forces, the whole idea of trust is present. You trust your buddies. It's called the buddy system. Mr. Bergdahl, Sergeant Bergdahl, who is shortly to be court-martialed, apparently, it is said, betrayed the trust of his buddies because they didn't expect him to leave them in the lurch in enemy territory. He may have had reasons of his own, I'm sure he did, and maybe he'll be found entirely innocent. Perhaps so, I don't know, we don't know. But the idea of trust violated sort of offends us, doesn't it? I mean, if we're vulnerable enough to trust somebody to come through for us, if we trust somebody enough to step on the water and walk over to them, we do expect some kind of support. And I think perhaps as much as any other disappointment in life, the one that I have encountered most often among other people, amongst those whom I talk to and counsel, has been a sense of trust betrayed. Now, many times they were, these folk, good folk, and I include myself anyway, the authors of their own disappointment. It was unrealistic for them to trust the person to come through in quite that way. We have a tendency to impose on others standards and norms and expectations that we would find perfectly rational, but they find perhaps too much for them to meet. And of course, they haven't the courage to say so. I can't meet your expectations. I can't merit your trust. I'm not able to do this. I've had people come to me and expect me to do things on their behalf. And it's only too easy to say, yeah, sure, you can trust me. I'll see you through. I'll get this done for you. And then, of course, we can't. And then we have to face the embarrassment of saying, sorry, I tried, I did my best. Well, it's a trust betrayed. So how do we deal with betrayal of trust? And why should we even trust? Why shouldn't we go through life as cynics? As cynics. What the Greeks called cynics. Cynic means dog in ancient Greek. I don't know why, but it does. Why should we work through our lives just as cynics and say, oh, well, you can't trust anybody. Everybody lets you down. If you do that, and it's a normal reaction, if you do that, if we do that, then we take away from human life, from existence, a very precious dimension, do we not? Trust we must. But how do we deal with disappointed trust? How do we use wisdom and good judgment in deciding whom or what to trust? Should we trust the person looking after our money? Should we trust the person who's in charge of our health care? I've had my trust betrayed in both those instances, and you probably have too. It took me 40 years to trust a surgery after I had an unhappy experience as a young man. And then I had to trust the surgeon. Luckily, I did. But you know, we are surrounded by always the uncertainty that our trust may be betrayed or that somehow it won't be supported. And when this happens, how do we manage it? Well, first of all, I think there's something inside ourselves that we can always trust. And we've read about it in Scripture. What Peter saw in Jesus' eyes when Jesus asked him to trust was something beyond the ordinary, some confidence that Peter saw and began to feel in himself. Even though he fell back many times, as we know, in his ability to trust his Lord, he was also lacking in trust for his own capacities. The Apostle Paul speaks of this all the time. He falters. So we have to know that there is something within us that we can trust. It's called the soul, the seed of eternal life, the Christ, if you want. That never lets us down. That's there. But in the meantime, because we live in the world and we live in a mutable world, a world of constant change and uncertainty, how do we live with the inevitable disappointments that shall arise in that experience? I think we have to be a little bit cold-blooded sometimes about trust and say, am I reposing too much trust in a person, in an institution, in a situation? Is it realistic for me to expect quite the dividend that I anticipate? Maybe we should be a little more critical of how we do give our trust. But if we give our trust, if we decide to give our trust, and as I say, trust oils the wheels of human existence. It's absolutely essential to our survival as a species. We must trust. Having understood that, and having understood too that perhaps we were a little bit careful about whom or what we trust, when the disappointments arise, as inevitably they shall, how do we deal with them? I think first of all, we rely on that good old unity principle. We forgive those. If we can, we forgive those whom we have trusted and who have let us down. Because if we don't in some way, we go on and on and on, rehearsing the situation, feeling saddened and let down. I don't know whether any of you ever watched that thing on television. It's absolutely compulsive. American Greed. Have you seen that? Where these guys or gals set out to deliberately defraud people who place their trust and their savings in their hands. What astounds me is how many of these people are willing to forgive. They've had everything taken from them by some fraud whom they trusted, but they forgive. They forgive. How they managed to learn that lesson is remarkable. Carol and I, a few years ago, lost a substantial amount of money because someone we thought was advising us well turned out to be really not advising us at all. But, you know, you can't hold the grudge. You've got to forgive. And second, I think you have to realize, we all have to realize, that however sharp the pain of betrayal, however saddening and disappointing the realization that our trust has been violated, nevertheless, that pain cannot disturb who and what we truly are. We say in unity, and I do believe this, nothing can disturb the calm peace of your soul. I didn't put the second piece in. Unless you let it. Unless you let it in. Unless you open the door. Unless you say, yes, I'm going to be angry, bitter, frustrated. Okay. But you don't have to. I've met people who've come through the most appalling betrayals of trust, like the woman in Germany with the priest. Appalling betrayals of trust, and yet they have learned to release that, to forgive, and to refuse to let that experience sour them at the heart and root of their being. They said, no, trust is what helps to make us human beings. Of course, trust will be betrayed. We shall be betrayed. Our trust shall be betrayed. We may ourselves fail to measure up to the trust that others have put in us. But I still believe that trust we must. Trust we must. Questions, observations? I'll sit down, shut up.